and welcome to Indie Book Magic, a podcast that connects geek readers and writers in an open, lighthearted, and occasionally random environment. We're your friendly hosts, Janeen Ippolito and
H.L. Burke.
And today we have a very special topic. We are talking about tax laws with regards to your writing career and your relationship with your cat, including the secret feline on keyboard deductions you can make. Right, Heidi?
Right.
Totally, completely, because we know all the things about taxes.
And cats.
And cats. Yes, very much about cats. I'm sure Bruce could get that, I'm sure you could get that deduction for Bruce, right, Heidi?
Yeah, he may have caused some recent equipment damage that I'm still too wounded to talk about.
Last poor Bruce, you made bad choices.
Yes, but no, this is the month of the foolishness, and we are continuing on our talk about humor in fiction.
Because that is a fantastic thing to talk about. And you and I, Heidi, tend to both really enjoy, putting humor into our fiction. So now we're going to share with all you listeners some of the tricks on how to do it. But first of all, we have to get down to the why. Why put humor in fiction? What's the point?
Well, for me, humor is a natural element of life. I've never been in there are very few situations I've ever been in that did not include some form of humor naturally. So I think if you don't include it in the world that you have, your world feels flat and it feels like it's missing something that would naturally be there. All cultures have had humor. I don't know if there is one that has totally lacked it. And it's a perspective on how characters see the world. It's what they find funny, what annoys them, what makes them react. All of that is where humor comes from. So I think you need it in your world to an extent. I guess there are certain things that you might be writing where it would feel inappropriate. But if you don't have it, to me, it just feels like there's something missing,
No, I agree with you, and I would say it's definitely a thing to include in your world building if you're doing speculative fiction, and even if you're not, it has some real relevance to your story and to how people will just work, because humor, and a large part has to do with catharsis, and so it's that release of emotional tension, that release of emotional stress, and that's both in the telling and in the reading. So both for an author writing the story and for a reader reading the story. And the thing is, who here hasn't read a book where you're just like, wow, this is just getting, more and more intense. Could I just get a little bit of something to release it? Humor does that. And in life too, humor does that. It really is a way to just kind of let go for a second and breathe. And it can also be, a coping mechanism for the dark stuff in books. And even for authors, like I know for me, sometimes if I'm going through something, I'm like, you know what? I am totally using this for a book. Or if I had something happen to me that was kind of humorous or funny, I said, I'm going to have to put that in a story. It's a way that you can, process through your life and what's going on in a way that uplifts and lets you, find something good about it, even if it's just that you get to laugh about it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Janine. And I think it can also be a subtle way to tackle deep issues. Because sometimes if you go full in on something that's very serious and important and you just hammer it down, you're going to wear your reader out. I don't read a lot of issue fiction just because I don't want that whole long, dark slog into sadness and misery. I want to have some laughter. And sometimes I get that release through things like magic and adventure and fighting back, which can be a symbolism for things people are dealing with. But other times it's just good to take it face on and laugh at it, laugh in the face of danger.
Yeah, laughing in the face of danger, whistling in the dark, etc. And through that, it can actually be, an even more powerful way to get across any message. So if you want to have a deep theme or issue in it, people swallow things a lot easier if it's coated in honey than if it's coated with, I don't know, something that's not honey. But the point is,
humor isn't it vinegar?
Yeah, vinegar, I guess. Who wants a spoonful of vinegar? So the idea being, humor is a great conduit for those things. I would say it can go into a little bit sketchy territory again if you go pure agenda and then overwhelms the humor, because then it can just not be funny because it feels really artificial. But still, it can be an angle to go there. And I found with my story, sometimes I'll write, go, oh, look, there's the theme right there. I had no idea, but that works. So now that we know that humor is a very useful thing to have in stories, where do you get that inspiration from? Well, one place is reading humorous books. And this can be like books that were written to be funny. It could be books written by comedians. It could be, memoirs written by comedians. It could be just books like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or Terry Pratchett's Discworld, books that are written from a very humorous tone. And if you're a very analytical person, you can actually go through and sort of analyze, how the author uses different elements to make things funny, how he uses over-exaggerated speech, and how he uses, or she uses, a certain descriptive style, or etc. to do that. Or the thing is, if you're not the kind of person who's very analytical, just immersing yourself in those books and in those places will kind of help you to naturally absorb it. So even if you're not analytical and you're not going to go through line by line and figure out all the nitty-gritty details of, writing the sentences in a certain way, immersing yourself in different funny books, especially things that you find funny, really can help you acquire those beats and give you a sense of rhythm and tone for things. You can't replace needing to immerse yourself in things that are funny. You can't just say, well, I don't like things that are funny, but I'm just going to teach myself anyway. You have to actually immerse yourself in funny things. And not just books, but what else can you, watch, Heidi?
Well, I almost thought we should title this episode, Heidi Tries to Find as Many Excuses to Quote Psych as Possible, because I think there is a well-known and established thing that I love humorous television. I don't really love humorous television shows so much as I love very specific humorous television shows. And one of those is Psych. And I think that, I'm not saying you should watch Psych, though you should. I'm saying that you need to find TV shows that represent how you feel about humor. And for some people that might be The Office, for some people that might be Psych, or something more like a more traditional sitcom. So when you find that humor that really clicks with you, I think it helps you understand what you find funny and then also what you don't find funny. Because for every show that you will like, there is going to be a show you just don't get. And trying to realize what sorts of humor bug you, what sorts of humor just kind of make you feel, well, that's not funny, make you feel like they're talking down to you, make you feel like they're too mean-spirited. Like, I can't watch The Big Bang Theory. I think it's really mean-spirited in spots. And I know my husband loves it, but I can't watch it. And there are other things like that that I feel that don't relate to me. And I think understanding what relates to you and what makes your inner self laugh, I think is what really gets to the heart of what you want to write. And you should never try to write something you don't like. I mean, that's just wrong.
Yeah, I mean, humor at its core has to be a very personal thing. So when you're trying to develop your own humorous voice and your own confidence in humor as a writer, you really need to acknowledge and let yourself own what you like and what you dislike. This is not the time to start trying to enjoy things just because, oh, so-and-so humor writer likes them. That doesn't mean you have to. You need to go do what works for you. And one of the most potent forms of inspiration is your own life. And that means you need to be able to laugh at yourself. And so you need to be secure in yourself in order to laugh at yourself. And I know for me, one of my inspirations when I'm writing things that are humorous is just having been in situations like that. Not exactly. I don't exactly go around next to dragon shifters and vampires and unicorns and those things, even though my life would be a lot more interesting that way.
Don't, Janeen.
I know.
My image of you has been shattered forever.
I know, because you would think in the mountains of Pennsylvania, you would just have all these things hidden in corners, but in fact, you don't. But I take a lot of inspiration from that and put it into my stories, which is why, there's certain things that I will naturally write. There's certain things that I naturally won't write. I tend to write based on different humorous experiences I have, different things that I've seen around me, and, use what you know. It doesn't mean that I don't put in, things like unicorns and stuff, which I don't actually know from a personal firsthand experience. But knowing, how sibling dynamics work, or, the awkwardness of moving to a new place, or the awkwardness of feeling like you're really out of your social economic class and everyone here is really, really rich. Things like that, you put in your stories and, use that, so use those awkward and uncomfortable situations to your advantage, because you can write them the most authentically because you live them.
Yeah, I think that's important because humor is often very awkward. It's random. It's uncomfortable. A lot of times it comes out of somebody being in almost literal pain, either emotionally or physically, that they've been caused by something. So you kind of have to embrace that and not let it hook you up. You can't be afraid to put your characters in a difficult situation or a hard situation, that will give them something that in turn they need to turn around and snark at, which I think kind of leads into our next point, Janeen, which is about
irony. Irony is really a big key to a lot of humor. If you don't know irony, then we're going to tell you about it so that you remember all those high school English classes, because it really is a key to unlocking a lot of humor in your fiction and your narrative. The first kind of irony is situational. So you're flipping things around. The opposite of what you expect to happen happens. A lot of times with this, you're going to take a typical trope and you're going to change it around. So you see this maybe in Shrek where the princess can fight, or, the ogre, the princess falls in love with the ogre. That's flipping a trope. That's flipping what you expect to happen and making it go in a different way. And that's a very common one that you see in a lot of different kinds of fiction.
Yeah, it's where you're cowering because the monster comes into the room, and he comes in the room and says, "Want some cupcakes?"
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful that you don't do this too much, because then the reader won't take you seriously, and they'll think that everything is a flipped trope. So you have to use it only in certain places.
I think that's why when I knew I was going to love the TV show Grimm is when the Bloop Bod jumps out at Nick and is going to attack him, and he's like, "No, come in for a beer." No, just messing with you.
And that works great because it fits the character and adds an element of surprise. But a lot of this TV show Grimm still stays very grim, which keeps that humor element fresh.
Yeah.
If everyone was like that, then after a while you'd be like, well, there's nothing scary here at all. Everyone's.
Yeah, you can only do that bait and switch on a reader a couple times before they're onto you.
Yep, definitely. And so what's another kind of irony, Heidi?
Well, verbal is the most common, and my favorite Psych quote.
Of course, that's 2 or 3 Psych quotes.
That is ironic. There's this. My favorite Psych quote is Sean says, "That's irony, isn't it, Gus?" And Gus says, "What's irony is every time you use the word irony, you ask me what irony means." It's that dry humor. It's that sarcastic calling somebody out for their nonsense. It's that pointing out the fatal flaw in just a deadpan manner, which I love. I love to write characters like that. I think it's because I live around so many of them. I married one. And then I somehow birthed 2. So yeah.
You have a house of irony, a house of sarcasm.
Even the cat, I swear, he's looking at me totally in sarcasm all the time. But yeah, I think that you don't have to write sarcastic characters. I think that American humor probably leans towards sarcasm a little more than some other, especially in our time and place. I think it's kind of the modern response to things. But there are other types of humor. I just think that it's one of the easiest to do with characters because it comes so naturally out of interactions, especially conflicted interactions. Like I said, it's calling someone out for their nonsense, or pointing out something that maybe should be obvious but isn't, or is another way of looking at things. And to me, that it just is the most natural one to write because it just happens.
Especially because, again, it's very written already. It's very verbal, so people are used to processing it, verbally. You don't really need a visual to appreciate sarcasm.
And it also does not rely so much on delivery, because the point to sarcasm is being a little bit understated. It's not about that big boisterous delivery with a lot of flair. It's about oh, you did that, did you? Yeah.
As long as you're saying the opposite of what you mean, as long as you're like, this is a great day, when it's like, pouring outside rain and, you're bleeding out of half your orifices or something, as long as you're, responding in a way that's clearly not what you're really feeling, you're good to go. So it definitely, I think, is one of the easiest ones for writers to add to their stories. But again, make sure you don't over add it, because then it can have kind of a mean tone to your story. And the last one is dramatic irony. Now, dramatic irony is where the reader suspects something will happen or knows something will happen that the character doesn't. And often we also call this foreshadowing, where that reader, the author puts in little things and make you think, oh no, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And those little Easter eggs that you pick up throughout the story, little clues that lead you into those great moments of tension and lead you, feeling on edge. Now, the thing that you can do with this with humor is if It lets you kind of see in advance that a clash is going to happen. And so you have a character over here that's like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to have like this great day. And the one thing that I'll do is I will make sure I never meet a dragon. And then you have a dragon saying, this is going to be a great day. I'll make sure the one thing I never do is meet a human. And then the reader will know that both these characters are going to meet at this place because they both say they're going to go to this place. But the characters don't know that. And so that's where you can create, increase the tension, get the readers reading ahead, flipping pages in anticipation. But it's also for a more of a humorous angle, especially if they're not out to actually kill each other. If they're out to kill each other, then it's dramatic foreshadowing. But if it's out for a humorous angle, then it can be used for humor, if it's for something goofy.
And I have a question for you. I want your take on this, because this is something I heard once, because it's related, because we give readers a lot of hints about what's coming, which readers are tied into. They know how stories work. And the character does not. The poor character is at a major disadvantage. And you get a lot about readers who think the character is stupid, or it took them so long to get it because the reader is here, like, put my hand above my head, and the character is still at their own level. Is there a balance, you think, for foreshadowing and stuff? Because you want your characters to seem smart. And I think to seem smart, a character actually has to be smarter than average just to seem average, just because the reader has so many advantages over them.
Especially if you're in a genre where the reader has read a lot of the same books. If you're using a lot of familiar genre tropes and things like that, you do have to make your character seem smarter. You do have to amp up everything you're doing. You may use less foreshadowing, and you actually may use more humorous foreshadowing instead of using dramatic foreshadowing. Because if you do it for humor, then what you're doing is combining dramatic foreshadowing with situational expectations. So that's where, they leap out and say, ah, and the reader's like, yes, that's it. I saw it. All these things are leading up, and like, oh no, it's a fluffy poodle.
I love fluffy poodles.
And so that way you can kind of combine those two kinds of irony, because you're basically tricking them with the foreshadowing. You can, as long as you thread it through and kind of you have to like leave a foreshadowing beneath the foreshadowing, you can actually trick the reader as well as the characters into two different things. And then we have that really unexpected bait and switch happen. And it takes some craft. That's where you have to use beta readers and editing. Like humor, that's the one thing, guys, you actually do have to spend some time polishing it. You have to make sure it works. You have to get beta reader feedback. If it doesn't work, you've got to go back and fix it to make sure it works.
Yeah, definitely.
But when it can work, it's pretty brilliant. So that's what we got with the irony. And now we're going on to some of the nuts and bolts of how to write humor. And what we've discovered as Heidi and I were just, discussing this is that it comes down a lot to your characters. In particular, you need to have characters that are reasonably well developed and who oppose each other or the situations around them in ways that you can mine for humor.
Yeah, and I think you get that contrast. A lot of humor is going to have to be based. You need to be able to see both sides. If you only see one side of a situation, it's hard to find the humor in it. I heard somewhere that good humor is based on truth, which is why we often don't find humor that makes fun of our political or religious beliefs to be funny, even if it is funny to the other side. It's funny to the other side because they see the truth in it. They think that, well, this is true. And that's why they find it funny, whereas we just see the lie in it. We don't believe it's true. And so that difference in worldview makes it so that one thing is funny to somebody who isn't. But the thing can also apply just to character situations. If characters have a stated way of thinking that to you as the reader is so much the truth, if you can't believe the way the villain is doing things, then it's going to be hard to see the humor in making fun of your own heroes, because you believe so strongly in their way of doing it that any humor that you do kind of skewing that kind of rings false,
Yes.
To me, you need to be able to understand where that person's coming from. Otherwise, it's not funny. It's just a lie. Yeah, and there's a difference between saying something sarcastic that's a little bit off and, taking something and making it seem ridiculous because you think it is ridiculous, and then just breaking down something and saying, well, that's a dog when it's a cat. That's not funny. Like calling a cat a sarcastic little murder machine. That's funny. Cats are, in some ways, sarcastic little murder machines. But calling a cat a dog is not funny.
No, yeah, agreed. And you actually used a couple other elements in that to show that it was funny, including the some hyperbole and some different other verbal tricks and mechanical tricks. So there is some elements of like mechanical work and just literal writing craft work in humor to make it funnier. And you pointed out something good about how we need to make sure that we have that variety and we see things from all sides. We need to also make sure you use characters from different backgrounds to create humor. It is one of the easiest ways to create humor. It's fish out of water. You put someone in a different culture and suddenly everything's funny. First of all, because audiences can identify with being in a foreign place and not knowing the rules of something, so that you have audience sympathy. And also you have these two different worldviews clashing, both of which think they're right. And so you have those elements of truth. And as long as you keep it, light instead of going into really dark places and going political or something, you can mine it for a lot of humor. Like, someone going into a different, culture and, trying to use the restroom or trying to, get a taxi or something like that. And they don't know the social cues and they're making all these mistakes. And the more you know about the situation and the more that you can convey the different nuances of that to the reader, the funnier it is. One of my favorite movies is the movie Rush Hour with, oh goodness, now I'm going to have a blank. Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker.
Was it Chris Tucker?
Chris Tucker.
I think it was Chris.
And if you're looking for an example of a really, really good, kind of that fish out of water thing where both sides are treated, with decent amounts of respect, that does a great job of that. Completely different goals, are clashing, different worldviews, different backgrounds. And in that case, this is jumping ahead a bit, but because those two characters ultimately have the same core sense of honor and duty and wanting to do the right thing, their clashes end up being funny and then can lead to friendship. If they didn't have the same worldview and the same core beliefs in honor and justice, then they would actually get really mean and lead to enemies. And I think that's actually something that you've done in one of your stories as well, right, Heidi?
Yeah, I think my most popular series right now is my Spellsmiths and Carver series, just because you get that dynamic of two characters who come from such different backgrounds. Auric is university educated. He thinks a little bit highly of his social status. He's very much a dreamer and a big idea person. And then you have Jericho, who's this learned on his feet, works of his hands, and just sees straight to the heart and the point of every matter. He's like an arrow to it. And the way that they clash constantly was a lot of fun. So when you put them in a situation where they're forced to work together, it was just constant, like, picking at each other and pointing out each other's flaws. And it did get a little mean-spirited, but that was because they were working towards something. And kind of spoilers, you want that flip. Like, there's this where they have to come to a realization that maybe they want to work together. And some characters lose their humor when they do that, but a good character will keep it, because I think that especially with, I don't want to say especially with guys, but it is kind of more common of guys to be a little mean in their interactions. I'm reading a book to the girls called Josh the Seven, which is a 14-year-old boy hero. And my daughter was like, "Are boys like this, Mom? They're kind of mean." And I'm like, that is part of how they interact, and there's that sarcasm, that poking at each other, and it's a stress response.
Yeah, and that can actually be a great way to bring out different character dynamics and humor. And as part of that, you need to go into some of the details of your characters. So if you're saying, well, my characters don't seem to have that, even though they're contrasting, then I would say you need to develop your characterization more. You need to figure out more. What do they find funny? What are their tics? What are their habits? Is one a clean freak, and is one of them like more messy? What annoys them? Make things about each other annoy them. What do they enjoy? Do they enjoy different things? Does one like silence and one likes, rock music? What do you think, Heidi?
Yeah, and you can use those knowledge of them to up the stress level. Like if you have a finicky character, getting them in a situation where they can't keep their looks pristine is going to get to their nerves. If one who's hungry all the time, that could make them more angry. And those little annoyances that add to stress. And it's those little things that it's very relatable, that the character is hungry, that the character is tired, that doesn't want to be dirty, that it can't stand that this person won't stop talking. And it's how you understand them, and there's a lot of humor in just making them uncomfortable and angry.
Which it does again go back to the fact you have to be willing to like torture your characters in this way. It's not just torturing them in terms of, oh, you know, their mom died or something. You have to be willing to make them uncomfortable in little ways. And sometimes those can be the more meaningful and profound ways if you like, you know, make them just a little bit damp or a little bit this.
Yeah, and I get overwhelmed if a character's mother, father, sister, brothers, uncles, former roommate all die off in quick succession. But if you have the character just totally getting dropped in a mud puddle, then flashed by a car, and then comes in to find that his hotel room has a squeaky mattress, then he's miserable, but it's not so high concept misery that you just can't handle anymore, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's just enough irritation to keep the story going, because you want that bit of irritation, you want that tension, because that keeps people reading and turning pages so that they can get to the end where hopefully things are resolved.
Yeah, and you very rarely want to break a character. It's really hard to go much farther with a broken character.
Yeah, don't. Well, I mean, you can break characters, but be advised, you've got to figure out how you're going to fix them then. So
yeah, or else they just stop.
And one last thing that can really help with humor and stories is, again, little things, funny words. Literally listen to words that make people laugh. Poop in English makes people laugh. Aardvark makes people like kind of smile. Llama, toilet. There's a whole list of different words that for some reason in American culture, we just find funny. And that's where, if you're concerned about, you know, whether your audience is going to get your humor or not, you need to know your audience and know their cultural background for their humor so that you know what words they're going to find funny versus, you know, anyone else.
And you can play around a little bit with references on this too, because there are readers that if you just use the word inconceivable in any context will crack up, if you know what I mean.
Yes, but then there's others that are going to be like, I don't know that. And then I remember watching this TV show once, and they kept using the phrase Leroy Jenkins for humor, and I'm like, I don't get this. And I'm like sitting next to my gamer husband, he's like, oh, like, oh, it's a gamer thing. Okay, that makes sense.
He still has his chicken.
There you go. So it went completely over my head. So what you just need, one way to make sure that your humor is going to be figured out by your readers is you got to know who your readers are, you know, and make sure they know that you're going to have humor that they like.
Yeah. See, my husband, when we got married, we went through this like crash course period where he had to introduce me to everything he loved. It was, yeah. So I watched the Leroy Jenkins, and I watched the Make Love Not Warcraft South Park episode. And it was like this crash course of this is me he gave me at the beginning of our marriage. It was very fun and entertaining. And I think that those sorts of in-jokes, you want to make them kind of like blink and you miss them, because like I said, if somebody doesn't get it and you've put a whole thing calling a big attention to somebody saying inconceivable or as you wish and nobody knows what that means, then you've lost something. But if it's just a casual reference in the dialogue that 1 in 10 people is going to get, then that's awesome. And I love those little Easter eggs, but you don't want it to be a huge Easter egg. It can't be like a bunny hopping up and down on it saying, hey.
Yeah, agreed. I tend to, for my stories, I tend to put just favorite lines from any of my movies that I've watched or books I've liked, or more like if I notice a line, you know, actually came from something, I'll just leave it in there and see if anyone notices that. And you also can use this through character reactions, particularly in description and internal monologue. And that comes back to, again, your writing craft. We live in a wonderful place where there are, you know, all these different words that mean the same thing. So you're going to want to choose, you know, descriptive words that are going to be more humorous. You know, the word bulging tends to be more funny than, like, you know, the word massive. Like there's different ways that you can describe something that will add more humor to it or less humor to it and make it more serious. And that's just where you need to, again, read books, practice, get beta readers who say, this is kind of serious. And if you were trying to go for funny, say, okay, I need to maybe go to my thesaurus.com or an actual thesaurus and, look up that word and find other words that mean mostly the same thing, but that, kind of make people smile more. And the same thing for, internal monologue. This sometimes depends on the POV you're writing in. If you're writing in like a first-person POV, then you can do a lot with internal monologue to give your main character a commentary on the world around them. And if you're writing for humor, that can let you do a lot of things with sarcasm and dry humor. If you're doing third person, but you're doing deep, then you can still get some different commentary in there. So that really depends on how you're writing the story. And so sometimes if you really want a story to be funny, but you're finding that it's not funny, it may be a matter of just changing the way you're writing it. It may be a matter of changing some words to their synonyms. It may be a matter of changing your POV.
So I don't think I got nearly enough Psych references into this episode. It's just really bugging me.
Well, you know what, Heidi? I think we need to have another episode on humor then.
You're right. There's so much more we could psych about. So next week, we will be doing more stuff on humor. More stuff where we're going to probably get into whether you can include humor in dark moments, when is humor too much, what genres work well with humor, and do different genres have different expectations for humor, and maybe some different types of humorous characters with a side of some book explosion examples.
Excellent. And I would actually include something in there also. When does humor work in romance and not? Because I can speak to personally. When I was a newbie writer 8 years ago, the one thing I used to get yelled at the most was when I would say, and they're going in for the kiss, and someone burps or something. I get my beta readers saying, no, that's not when humor goes in there. And for me, it was because I had to research more of how to write kisses and those things. So I just would put in humor instead, kind of get myself out of it. And again, just like dark moments, romantic moments, there's sometimes when you can really go for it. And there's sometimes when, just let them fight, let them kiss, keep a straight face. And there's times you can
cake.
Let them eat cake. And then there's times when you can, have an owl or a fox, interrupts the wedding.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Indie Book Magic. Please leave us awesome feedback on our Facebook page, reviews on iTunes, SoundCloud, say hello to us on our website. We love to chat and get to know you more as well. And for right now, this is Janeen Ippolito and
H.L. Burke
signing off. Have a fantastic
spring day.
Both of those things.